Hi, Professor Wainaina here, your 5 minute teacher on education, childhood, youth, parenting, and all things school. Welcome. In managing screen time and electronics for your child, I have consistently referred to boundaries. The question that arises is, what are boundaries and how do you make them work? I'll define. A boundary is your defining and last action that makes your kid's reaction null and void. The important thing to note here is that a boundary is an action from you. For example, if your child contravenes screen time, you take away the screen or you turn it off. That is a boundary. It is a defining and last action from you that makes your child's reaction null and void. No matter what the child says or does, screen time has been enforced by a defining and last action from you. When I teach my students, I like to define stuff for what it is not rather than what it is, and I might just as well do this here. So, what are boundaries not? Boundaries are not spontaneous reactions driven by frustration or anger. They are not threats. They are not emotional outbursts. They are not ongoing negotiations with your child. They are not demands for an explanation of the undesired behavior. They are not discussions of consequences for contravening behavior. They are not requests for an apology. They are not reflections by the child on their actions, and they are not expressions of anger or disappointment on your part. Boundary sio kesi. Boundaries are not rules or guidelines. Boundaries are the actions you take to enforce those rules. Think of a boundary as the point where your words are enforced by action. When you tell your child they have a limit on screen time and they continue to ignore it, a boundary means you take action without further debate. Your action should stop the behavior without any further reference to the child. That is a boundary. So, how do you make boundaries work? The first step is to be clear about what the required behavior is. Set very clear rules and regulations that your child understands. For example, if you're setting limits around screen time, explain exactly how much time is allowed. Then explain that the screen will be withdrawn if the regulation is contravened. You have set the behavior and the consequence. If and when agreed screen time is exceeded, withdraw the screen. Boundary is that action of enforcement. It is also important to note that though initially boundaries may escalate power struggles, if you are consistent, they will eventually limit or altogether eliminate power struggles with your child. When your children defy rules, they often try to negotiate, argue, or test your authority. But when you enforce a boundary, you remove the opportunity for negotiation. There is no argument because your action ends the dispute. Over time, your child learns that no amount of arguing or resisting will change the outcome. They learn to respect rules. Behaviorally, this approach aligns with what scholars call operant conditioning, where consistent consequences shape future behavior. If your child knows that breaking the rules will always lead to an unnegotiated action from you, they will not repeat the behavior. The key here is consistency. If you enforce one day and let it slide the next, your child will continue to test the limits, trying to figure if there is indeed a boundary. And keep your own emotions out of this. Do not treat contravening of rules as a personal affront on yourself and start yelling out of frustration or being excitable. Let your child know that boundaries are your action, not emotions, either yours or theirs. This helps them see that the boundary is not a punishment out of anger, but a natural consequence of their choices. I will repeat. A boundary is your defining and last action which makes your kid's reaction null and void. The important thing to note here is that a boundary is an action from you. It is not a negotiation or an explanation or an emotional response. It is an action. Go do it.